In a world where danger often lurks in the shadows, few individuals embody the spirit of resilience and strength like Major Sarah Thompson. A commanding presence at 5'9", she carries herself with an air of confidence that is hard to ignore. Her piercing blue eyes, honed through years of training and experience, reflect both a fierce determination and an unyielding commitment to her mission. As a highly skilled commander in Delta Force, Sarah has spent over a decade navigating the complexities of counterterrorism operations, covert missions, and high-stakes scenarios that would intimidate even the most seasoned operators. Sarah's journey into the elite ranks of Delta Force began in her early years. Growing up in a small Midwestern town, she was always drawn to action and adventure. Her childhood was filled with tales of heroism from her father, a Vietnam War veteran who instilled in her a deep sense of duty and sacrifice. After excelling in academics and athletics throughout high school, Sarah enlisted in the Army right after graduation. Her innate leadership skills quickly shone through during basic training, propelling her to the top of her class. Once she completed her initial training, Sarah applied for the rigorous selection process for Delta Force. It was here that she faced the ultimate test of physical endurance and mental fortitude. The grueling assessments pushed her to her limits, demanding not just strength, but strategic thinking under pressure. Many candidates faltered, but Sarah's relentless spirit and unwavering focus earned her a coveted spot in one of the most elite units in the military. Now, as she stands on the cusp of a critical mission in an undisclosed location overseas, Sarah is acutely aware of the stakes at hand. The operation involves dismantling a dangerous arms trafficking ring that has been supplying weapons to extremist groups. With intelligence reports indicating imminent threats against civilian populations, Sarah feels the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. This is not just another mission. It's about saving lives and ensuring that justice prevails. As Major Thompson prepares for deployment, she reviews her team's profiles and operational plans meticulously. Each member of her unit brings unique skills to the table: snipers, demolitions experts, and intelligence analysts, all trained to execute complex operations seamlessly. She knows that their success hinges on unity and trust. They are not just comrades, they are family. With each briefing, she emphasizes the importance of communication and adaptability, two principles that have guided her throughout her career. But beyond the tactical preparation lies a personal resolve that fuels Sarah's determination. She carries with her the memory of fallen comrades who sacrificed everything for their country. Their faces haunt her not as ghosts, but as reminders of why she fights: to honor their legacy and protect those who cannot protect themselves. As she looks out over the horizon from her base camp, she reflects on how far she has come while understanding that every mission holds unforeseen challenges. Today is different. Today feels heavy with an unknown tension as Sarah receives last-minute intel about potential threats in the area they're about to infiltrate. She gathers her team for one final briefing before they embark on their operation under the cover of darkness. It is within these moments, where adrenaline mixes with anticipation, that Sarah shines as a leader, inspiring confidence and courage among her team members. With everything prepared for deployment, Sarah slips into combat gear, an extension of herself, and heads toward the aircraft that will take them closer to their objective. As she boards, she takes a deep breath to center herself mentally. This mission will require every ounce of her training and instinct. Little does she know that fate has other plans in store for her this day. As she embarks on what should be a straightforward operation against a criminal network, an unexpected turn awaits. A collision course with escaped prisoners who are unaware that their target is not just any woman but a force to be reckoned with. A Delta Force commander ready to face whatever challenges lie ahead. The stage is set for an encounter that will test not only her tactical prowess, but also her ability to navigate an unforeseen crisis with life-altering consequences for all involved. In the dead of night, the silence of the high-security facility was shattered by a series of calculated explosions. Underneath the cover of darkness, a group of desperate men orchestrated their escape from what had become their prison, a fortress designed to hold the most dangerous criminals. The facility had long been a symbol of retribution and justice, but for these inmates, it was a suffocating cage that stifled their hopes and dreams. Among the escapees was Marcus Reed, a former gang leader whose charisma once commanded loyalty from his followers. Sentenced to life for orchestrating violent crimes, he had spent years plotting his escape, fueled by the belief that he could reclaim his power and influence beyond the prison walls. Reed's motivation was clear. He wanted vengeance against those who had wronged him, and he was determined to rebuild his empire from the ashes. As Reed and his accomplices meticulously planned their breakout, they exploited every weakness in the facility's security system. With insider information provided by a corrupt guard who had been bribed with promises of money and freedom, the escape plan took shape. Timing their actions with precision, they waited for a scheduled power outage during routine maintenance, when surveillance cameras would momentarily flicker off. When the time came, chaos erupted. Explosives ripped through sections of the compound, sending guards scrambling and alarms blaring. The sudden eruption of noise and confusion served as both an opportunity and a distraction. As smoke filled the air, panic spread like wildfire among both inmates and staff. It was in this turmoil that Reed and his group made their move. They navigated through the darkened hallways with adrenaline coursing through their veins, driven by an instinctual need for freedom. The sound of gunfire echoed behind them as guards attempted to regain control of the situation. But for Reed and his crew, there was no turning back. They were fueled by desperation and a fierce desire to escape at any cost. Amidst the chaos, another figure emerged. Tony, the Snake, Salvatore, a notorious con artist known for his quick wit and cunning ability to manipulate others. He had been serving time for fraud, but had connections on the outside that could help him disappear completely. His motivation was less about revenge and more about survival. He wanted to avoid returning to a life behind bars at all costs. Salvatore latched onto Reed's plan, believing that together they could create a new life far away from their former lives of crime. As they raced through the facility's labyrinthine corridors, they faced unexpected obstacles. Guards, alerted by the alarms, began to converge on their position. A brief firefight erupted in one corridor as Reed's crew fought back with makeshift weapons, anything they could find in their path. Tension mounted as every second ticked away. Failure meant being returned to confinement without mercy. In an unexpected twist, fate intervened again when one of Reed's men stumbled upon an unguarded back exit leading to a maintenance tunnel, a potential lifeline that could lead them outside the prison walls. With no time to waste, they dashed toward this new opportunity, hearts pounding in unison as they pushed through steel doors into darkness. Emerging from the tunnel into the cool night air felt like emerging from a nightmare into sunlight. However, freedom came with its own set of challenges. They quickly realized that escaping the prison was only half the battle. They needed transportation and a safe haven where they could regroup and strategize their next moves. As they scoured nearby areas for any sign of a getaway vehicle, Marcus couldn't shake off a sense of urgency mixed with exhilaration. He rallied his crew with promises of power and wealth if they stayed united in their quest for freedom. With adrenaline still coursing through their veins, they managed to hijack an unsuspecting driver's car parked nearby before speeding away into the night, into unknown territory where danger awaited at every turn. Little did they know that their fateful decision to flee would lead them straight into an unforeseen encounter with Major Sarah Thompson, a Delta Force commander unknowingly trapped within their chaotic world. The stage was set not just for survival, but for an unexpected clash between two worlds, one driven by vengeance and desperation, and another guided by discipline and duty. As they raced away from the prison grounds, neither party could predict how deeply intertwined their destinies would soon become. As Major Sarah Thompson's team prepared for their mission, she found herself momentarily lost in thought, contemplating the stakes of the operation ahead. It was a crisp night, and the air was charged with anticipation as the helicopter descended toward their drop zone. The team would be inserting into a remote area to gather intelligence before engaging with the arms trafficking ring. However, unbeknownst to her, even before they could land, fate had other plans in store. Just a few miles away, Marcus Reed and his crew were navigating through the outskirts of town, adrenaline still pumping from their dramatic escape. Their minds raced with thoughts of survival, finding shelter, regrouping, and plotting their next move. In their frantic dash for freedom, they needed a vehicle that could help them blend into civilian life and avoid detection by law enforcement. As luck would have it, they spotted Sarah's SUV parked on the side of a secluded road near a gas station, an unassuming vehicle belonging to an ordinary woman who had just finished her evening errands. The sight of the car ignited an idea in Reed's mind. He turned to his accomplices with determination in his eyes. "We need wheels. Grab that car," he ordered, his voice carrying an edge of desperation. Salvatore nodded in agreement, recognizing the opportunity. They quickly devised a plan to take the vehicle and ensure their escape when unnoticed. With their hearts racing and nerves on high alert, they approached the SUV cautiously, ready to seize what they believed was their ticket to freedom. As Sarah exited the gas station convenience store with a bag of snacks and drinks for her team, she felt an odd sense of unease creeping over her, a sense that something was off. Shrugging it off as pre-mission jitters, she dismissed her instincts and focused on her responsibilities as a leader. She was unaware that just moments away from her stood 3 escaped convicts who were about to change the course of her night forever. Reed and his crew took advantage of Sarah's distraction. They approached her from behind as she loaded her items into the back seat of her SUV. With swift precision, they surrounded her, blocking any chance of escape or even shouting for help. "Get in the car. Now," Reed barked, his voice low but assertive enough to convey threat. Startled by the sudden confrontation but instinctively sensing danger, Sarah turned to face them. For a fleeting moment, confusion washed over her features. 3 men in disheveled clothing demanding compliance felt surreal against the backdrop of her disciplined world. But she quickly regained her composure. Years of training kicked in as she sized them up, assessing their intentions and capabilities. "What do you want?" she asked firmly, adopting a tone meant to assert dominance even in this precarious situation. "Just get in the car," Reed shouted again, but this time with desperation laced through his words. "We're not messing around." Realizing that compliance could buy her precious seconds, Sarah took a calculated step back toward the passenger side door while keeping her eyes on them. She needed to gather information without revealing who she truly was. Every instinct told her that revealing her identity would only escalate the situation. The tension escalated as Salvatore's gaze flickered nervously between Sarah and Reed. Something about the way she stood there made him uneasy. To him, she didn't seem like an ordinary woman. There was a strength radiating from her that felt out of place among their chaotic world. But before he could voice his doubts, Reed shoved Sarah forward into the passenger seat. Once inside, they quickly forced themselves into the vehicle, Reed taking the driver's seat, while Salvatore slid into the back alongside another member of their crew. As Reed revved up the engine and peeled away from the gas station parking lot, Sarah's mind raced through possible escape strategies. She remained calm outwardly, while searching for any opportunity to turn the tables on her captors. The uncertainty about who exactly they were only heightened her resolve. These men were reckless criminals desperate for freedom, and yet they had no idea whom they had just kidnapped. As they sped down darkened streets away from civilization, chaos enveloped them all. The desperate criminals unaware that their fate was now intertwined with that of a Delta Force commander who had faced far worse threats than this momentary predicament. Little did they know that beneath Sarah's composed exterior lay not just fear, but also an unyielding spirit waiting for its moment to strike back. The kidnapping incident marked a pivotal turning point, a collision between 2 worlds where neither party understood just how deeply their paths were about to intertwine, and how survival instincts would soon clash head-on in ways none could predict. As the SUV roared down the dimly lit streets, the atmosphere inside the vehicle became thick with tension. Reed gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white as he navigated through the twists and turns of the night. The urgency of their escape hung heavily in the air, mingling with a palpable sense of desperation that radiated from each of the escaped prisoners. In the passenger seat, Major Sarah Thompson remained poised, but her mind raced as she took in every detail of her surroundings. The men flanking her were on edge, their eyes darting nervously between her and one another. It was evident they were trying to maintain control over a situation that was spiraling out of their grasp, but they lacked the composure to truly command it. Their desperation was almost tangible, fueling an electric tension that crackled in the small confines of the vehicle. "Keep your hands where we can see them," Reed barked sharply, his voice strained with authority that felt forced. He glanced over at Sarah, who sat quietly, absorbing every nuance of their behavior. In his mind, he was asserting dominance, a necessity for someone who had spent years in prison and now craved power. Sarah's heart rate quickened, not out of fear, but from the adrenaline surging through her veins. She could sense their vulnerability beneath the bravado. These men were dangerous, yes, but they were also cornered animals, driven by sheer panic rather than calculated strategy. She understood that they were unaware of who she truly was. To them, she appeared to be just another victim caught in their reckless escape. In the back seat, Salvatore leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing with suspicion as he studied Sarah's calm demeanor. "What's your name?" he demanded, trying to gauge her level of compliance. There was a quiver in his voice that betrayed his uncertainty. "Anna," Sarah replied smoothly, adopting a mundane alias. "Just Anna, an ordinary woman caught up in this mess." "Just keep quiet," Reed interrupted sharply, his focus still on the road ahead. "We'll figure out what to do with you once we're clear." He pressed down harder on the gas pedal, pushing their stolen vehicle faster into the night. The tension escalated further as they drove deeper into uncharted territory. The streets became more isolated and dimly lit, heightening everyone's senses. The fear of being captured again loomed over Reed and his crew like a dark cloud. Their desperation manifested in harsh glances exchanged among them. Each man instinctively understood that failure meant a return to prison, an outcome they would do anything to avoid. Sarah continued to observe them closely, noting their body language and interactions. Reed was clearly trying to project strength while wrestling with insecurities stemming from his time behind bars. Salvatore fidgeted beside her. He seemed torn between playing it tough and retreating into fear. The other man remained silent but alert, scanning for possible threats outside the vehicle. Suddenly, Sarah broke the tense silence with a question designed to provoke thought. "What are you going to do next?" Her tone was steady but laced with underlying intent. She wanted them to think beyond mere survival. Reed shot her an irritated glance. "That's none of your business." "Actually," she countered smoothly, "it is my business now that I'm involved in this situation." Her calm demeanor unsettled them further. Salvatore shifted uneasily at her words, while Reed's frustration bubbled beneath the surface. He slammed a hand against the steering wheel in anger. "Shut up. You don't get to dictate anything here." But Sarah pressed on, knowing that any sign of weakness could be exploited if she played her cards right. "You're running blindly," she said pointedly. "You think you have control over this situation, but you don't even know what you're up against." Reed's eyes narrowed dangerously as he glanced at her again, this time weighing his options carefully. He sensed that Sarah wasn't just any ordinary woman. There was something about her that felt different, something that hinted at strength beneath her composed exterior. In that moment of uncertainty, Sarah seized upon his hesitation and allowed a small smile to cross her lips, a subtle acknowledgement of their faltering confidence. It was an invitation for him to underestimate her further while she plotted her next move. "Listen," she said softly yet firmly as they turned onto an even darker road lined with trees casting ominous shadows against the moonlight. "You can either let me go now or risk making a serious mistake." Her words hung heavy in the air like fog enveloping everything around them, a perfect metaphor for their predicament. Unbeknownst to them all, this moment marked not only a battle for control within that SUV, but also an unspoken shift in power dynamics that would soon unfold in ways neither party could anticipate. As they sped further into darkness, tension crackled like electricity. It became clear that nothing would be resolved without conflict, and perhaps confrontation would lead to unexpected revelations about who truly held power in this life-and-death game unfolding before them all. As the SUV hurtled deeper into the night, Major Sarah Thompson faced a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. Internally, she was a storm of conflicting feelings. Her training as a Delta Force commander clashed with the unsettling reality of being held captive by escaped prisoners. She had been in high-pressure situations before, but this felt different. She was not just leading a team into battle, but rather navigating a treacherous game of survival where her very life hung in the balance. At that moment, Sarah forced herself to take a deep breath, grounding herself in the present. Panic was not an option. Years of rigorous training had ingrained in her the importance of staying calm under pressure. Her mind raced through tactical scenarios while assessing her captors, three desperate men whose fear and uncertainty were palpable beneath their bravado. Marcus Reed, gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles, projected an air of authority, but Sarah could sense his underlying desperation. He was trying to maintain control over a situation that was spiraling out of his grasp. He barked commands at his crew, attempting to mask his own insecurities, and she could see the tension radiating from him like heat waves. In the back seat, Salvatore fidgeted nervously, casting furtive glances at her as if trying to gauge whether she posed a threat or if he should remain on guard. The other man remained silent but alert, contributing to the growing tension in the vehicle. Sarah's keen instincts told her that they were all on edge, a fact she could exploit if she played her cards right. As they sped through darkened streets, Sarah focused on gathering information about their escape plan and motivations. Understanding their mindset could provide her with leverage. "You know," she began, allowing an air of casualness to seep into her tone, "this is not going to end well for any of you if you don't think this through." Reed shot her an irritated glare but didn't respond immediately. Instead, he tightened his grip on the wheel, determination etched across his face. It was clear he was wrestling with his own internal conflict. Despite being armed with a sense of urgency to escape, he was also afraid of what would happen if they were caught again. "Shut up," he finally snapped, but Sarah recognized this as nothing more than a defensive reaction, one that stemmed from insecurity rather than true authority. In her mind, Sarah weighed the options available to her. If she revealed her identity as a Delta Force commander now, it might incite panic or aggression among her captors, a dangerous gamble when they were already so volatile. Instead, maintaining the guise of an ordinary woman would allow her to remain underestimated. She needed time to formulate a plan and observe their weaknesses. "What's your plan once you're out?" she asked again, this time softer but laced with purpose. "You can't just drive into the sunset and expect everything to be okay." The question hung in the air between them like a challenge. Reed glanced at Salvatore for support before answering. "We'll figure it out once we get far enough away." "Far enough away from what?" Sarah pressed gently, watching for any signs of unraveling among them. "You're not just running from prison, you're running from law enforcement." Her words struck a nerve. Reed's jaw clenched tighter as he stared ahead with determination masked by anxiety. She could see the wheels turning in his mind, the realization that they were trapped in a spiral of desperation fueled by fear. For Sarah, each moment felt like an opportunity masked as peril. Inside her head, strategies unfolded like plans on a map. She cataloged exits from the vehicle and potential improvisations that could turn this situation in her favor when the time was right. As they continued down an isolated road lined with trees casting long shadows against their path, she couldn't help but feel an unexpected sympathy for these men. They were not just criminals. They were products of their choices and circumstances. Men whose lives had spiraled out of control until freedom seemed like their only option. Yet sympathy didn't cloud Sarah's judgment. It sharpened it. This understanding only fortified her resolve to survive and regain control over the situation without revealing who she truly was. If anything, it became clear that these men were cornered animals. They would lash out if they felt threatened. In that moment of reflection and assessment, something shifted within Sarah. She realized that despite being physically bound by circumstance, she possessed something far more powerful: mental resilience and strategic thinking honed through years of training and experience. As they turned another corner into deeper darkness, Sarah resolved to bide her time, to wait for the perfect moment when their desperation would reach its peak and fear would overshadow their bravado. She would not just survive this encounter. She would turn it to her advantage when least expected. In those critical seconds inside the SUV, where tension crackled like electricity, Major Sarah Thompson calculated each risk while maintaining an outward facade of compliance. There was strength and patience even amidst chaos, and soon enough, every choice made would lead them all toward an inevitable reckoning neither side could foresee just yet. As the SUV sped along the deserted roads, the atmosphere inside remained fraught with tension, but an undercurrent of humor began to bubble beneath the surface, one that only Major Sarah Thompson fully understood. Her captors, desperate and frazzled, were so caught up in their escape that they failed to recognize the true nature of their situation. They believed they held all the power, oblivious to the fact that they had kidnapped a highly trained Delta Force commander. Reed glanced at Sarah, his expression a mix of defiance and bravado. "You think you can just sit there and act like this is no big deal? You're in way over your head," he shouted, trying to assert his dominance. Sarah smiled inwardly at his dramatic flair. He was clearly trying to project control, but she sensed his insecurity. It was almost comical how unaware he was of her capabilities. "I'm just saying," she replied calmly. "If you think this is going to be easy for you, you might want to reconsider." In the back seat, Salvatore shifted uncomfortably, still glancing at her with suspicion. "What's your deal? You're acting like you're not even scared," he remarked, an edge of disbelief in his voice. "I guess I'm just not easily intimidated," she replied with a slight shrug. The statement was both true and strategic. She hoped it would plant seeds of doubt in their minds about her perceived vulnerability. "Yeah? Well, you should be." Reed snapped back, irritation evident. "We've got guns and nothing to lose." His bravado echoed through the vehicle, but Sarah could feel the cracks beginning to appear in his confidence. As they drove on, Sarah seized the opportunity to push their buttons further. "You know," she said nonchalantly, "it's interesting how poorly planned this whole escape is. Did you really think stealing a car would go unnoticed?" Reed's face turned red with frustration, while Salvatore chuckled nervously at her comments. "What do you know about planning escapes?" Reed shot back defensively as he shifted gears, trying to maintain focus on the road ahead. "More than you might think," she replied with a smirk, knowing full well that her words stung more than they realized. The tension escalated when they encountered a checkpoint ahead, a police barrier set up to monitor traffic in light of recent prison escapes. Reed's hands tightened around the steering wheel, panic flickering across his face as he weighed their options. The prisoners had been reckless until now. Suddenly, reality crashed down on them like a wave. "What do we do?" Salvatore whispered urgently from the back seat. "Just act natural," Reed muttered through gritted teeth as he slowed down near the checkpoint. "We'll figure something out." As they approached the officers on duty, Sarah seized upon the moment of chaos and confusion. With a calculated risk, she leaned forward slightly in her seat and called out in a playful tone, "Hey guys, don't mind me. I'm just being kidnapped here." The stunned silence that followed was almost palpable. Reed shot her a furious glare, while Salvatore burst out in nervous laughter, clearly unsure whether to find her comment funny or alarming. "What are you doing?" Reed hissed at Sarah as panic washed over him. "I'm just trying to help," she replied innocently, maintaining her facade while observing their reactions closely. The officers exchanged glances at each other and then back at the SUV. A mix of confusion and concern etched on their faces as they took in the scene unfolding before them. It was clear that they were assessing whether this was truly a kidnapping or if something else was at play. "Ma'am, are you all right?" one officer asked hesitantly as he approached their vehicle cautiously. Sarah smiled sweetly, a picture of calm amidst chaos. "Oh yes, just taking an unexpected detour with my friends here." She gestured toward her captors with an exaggerated flourish. The moment was surreal. Reed's anxiety reached its peak as he realized how quickly things could spiral out of control if any officer decided to investigate further. He glanced nervously between Sarah and the officers outside, who were now scrutinizing him closely. Salvatore's nervous laughter faded into silence as he recognized how precarious their situation had become. The trio's underestimation of Sarah's ability to manipulate the moment hung heavily in the air, a realization dawning upon them that perhaps this captive wasn't as helpless as they had assumed. "Drive away. Now," Reed ordered abruptly, panic seeping into his command as he pressed down on the accelerator without waiting for another second of indecision. As they sped away from the checkpoint and into the night once again, Sarah couldn't help but chuckle softly under her breath, part amusement and part disbelief at their sheer ignorance. The absurdity of it all made her heart race with excitement. She was not just surviving, but weaving through an intricate game where she held more cards than her captors ever imagined. With every interaction, every exchange, they further showcased their underestimation of her skills and experience. Little did they know that soon enough, this encounter would shift dramatically once she decided it was time to reclaim control over her fate, and theirs too would be forever altered in ways they could never predict. As the SUV sped through the winding roads, Major Sarah Thompson's mind raced with tactical considerations. Captured, but far from helpless, she remained acutely aware of her surroundings and the dynamics within the vehicle. While Reed and his crew were preoccupied with their escape, Sarah seized the opportunity to gather critical intelligence about her captors, information that could prove invaluable in turning the tide of this encounter. "Where are we headed?" she asked casually, keeping her tone light and inquisitive, as if they were engaging in harmless conversation rather than navigating a high-stakes kidnapping. Reed, still flustered from their near miss at the checkpoint, glanced at her warily. "None of your business," he snapped, but there was a tremor in his voice that revealed his unease. "Sure, it's just that I'm curious," Sarah replied, shrugging nonchalantly. "I mean, you have to have a plan, right? All this running must lead somewhere." Salvatore leaned forward in his seat, intrigued despite himself. "We're going to meet up with some people who can help us lay low for a while," he admitted, his voice dropping slightly, as if sharing a secret. "Sounds smart," Sarah said with a nod. "But how do you know they won't just turn you in?" This question hung in the air, momentarily halting their chatter. Reed shot Salvatore a glare, clearly annoyed that he had let slip crucial details about their escape plan. Sarah noticed the tension between them and filed it away for later consideration. Any rift among captors could be an advantage. "We know these guys," Reed finally replied, attempting to regain control of the conversation. "They owe us favors." "Favors? That sounds risky," she remarked casually. "What happens if they decide it's time to collect on those favors?" The doubt in her voice seemed to resonate with Reed. For a moment, he hesitated, weighing his options as uncertainty flickered in his eyes. Sarah recognized this as an opportunity to exploit further. She needed them to second-guess their decisions and reveal more details about their situation. "What's your deal anyway?" Salvatore asked, trying to shift the focus back onto her. "Why are you so interested in our plans?" Sarah chuckled softly, as if amused by his curiosity. "I'm just trying to understand how you escaped from prison without a solid plan. It's kind of fascinating." Reed scoffed, but couldn't hide the frustration boiling beneath the surface. "We don't need you judging our plans," he growled. "Oh, no judgment here. Just genuine interest," Sarah assured him with a disarming grin. "But if you don't mind me asking, what did you get locked up for?" The question seemed innocuous enough, yet it carried weight. Reed shifted uncomfortably in his seat, while Salvatore leaned forward again, unable to resist sharing his story. "I got caught up in something bigger than me. A con gone wrong," he admitted with a hint of regret in his voice. "That's rough," Sarah replied empathetically, taking note of the flicker of vulnerability behind Salvatore's bravado. "And what about you?" She turned toward Reed. "I don't see how that's relevant," he snapped back defensively. "Oh, come on. We're all friends here." Her tone was teasingly playful as she continued probing gently. "You can trust me." "Trust isn't exactly something we give away easily," Reed shot back, but Sarah could sense that her persistence was wearing him down. As they continued down the road, weaving through quiet neighborhoods and rural stretches, she subtly shifted her questions toward their escape route and potential weaknesses in their strategy. "So where do you think you'll go once you meet your contacts? You can't just stay hidden forever." Reed clenched his jaw but couldn't help answering her question, his need to assert dominance warring against his growing apprehension. "We'll head south, find a place where no one knows us." "But what if law enforcement starts putting out alerts? You really think you can blend into the crowd?" Sarah pressed further, aware that even minor doubts could create cracks in their confidence. Their conversation gradually revealed snippets of their plan, destinations that were not only geographically questionable, but also predictable, places familiar enough for law enforcement to stake out quickly if they suspected anything amiss. With each piece of information they divulged, whether it was about previous encounters with law enforcement or where they intended to hide, Sarah cataloged it all mentally like data points feeding into a larger operational picture. The gaps in their strategy became glaringly apparent as they spoke. These men were relying on luck rather than sound tactics. As they approached an intersection where Reed had to make a decision about which direction to take next, Sarah felt a shift within herself, a bubbling excitement at being able to potentially control this situation from within. The knowledge she gathered would serve as ammunition when the moment was ripe for action. With every question she posed and every word exchanged, Major Sarah Thompson was not only gathering intelligence, but also sowing seeds of doubt among her captors. a subtle manipulation that would ultimately play into her hands when she chose to reveal her true identity and reclaim command of her own fate. Little did they know that underestimating her would soon become their greatest mistake. She was no ordinary woman. They were merely pawns on a board where she held all the cards waiting for the perfect moment to play them. As the SUV continued its journey through the night, Major Sarah Thompson found herself grappling with an unexpected wave of empathy toward her captors. Despite being on the wrong side of the law, Reed and Salvatore were not simply criminals. They were men with histories, dreams, and, more importantly, regrets. Each moment in their presence peeled back layers of their personas, revealing vulnerabilities that humanized them beyond the labels they had received. "Do you ever think about what got you here?" Sarah asked casually, breaking the silence that had settled inside the vehicle. The question hung in the air, a gentle prod into their pasts. Reed shot her a wary glance in the rearview mirror. "What do you care?" he replied defensively, but there was a flicker of curiosity in his tone. "I'm just curious," she said with sincerity. "Everyone has a story, a reason behind their choices. I know mine. I'd love to hear yours." Salvatore leaned forward, his interest piqued despite Reed's reticence. "What's it to you? You think you're some kind of therapist?" "Not at all," she replied calmly. "Just someone who understands that life can throw us into tough situations." Reed gripped the steering wheel tighter, his jaw clenching as he considered her words. Sarah sensed that he was wrestling with his thoughts, torn between maintaining control over the situation and expressing something deeper that had long been buried beneath layers of anger and defiance. "Look," she continued gently, "I know it's hard to talk about this stuff, but sometimes sharing can help lighten the load." After a moment of silence, Reed finally relented. "It's not like we had a choice," he muttered bitterly. "I grew up in a bad neighborhood. One bad decision led to another, and before I knew it, I was knee-deep in crime." "Bad decisions have a way of snowballing," Sarah agreed empathetically. "But did you ever think about what you wanted for yourself? Something beyond just surviving?" His eyes flickered with something akin to regret as he reflected on her words. "I wanted to be someone. I wanted respect. Power," he admitted reluctantly. "And what does that get you now?" she pressed softly, sensing an opening. "Nothing," Reed replied quietly. "Just time locked away." Salvatore interjected, his voice tinged with vulnerability. "I was trying to provide for my family, get them out of debt. But then things went sideways," he admitted, his tone heavy with guilt. "I thought I could handle it." "There's often more to every story than meets the eye," Sarah said gently, recognizing the weight of Salvatore's admission. She felt an unexpected connection forming, a bridge across their disparate worlds based on shared human experiences. "What about you?" Reed asked suddenly, shifting the focus back onto her with equal parts skepticism and genuine curiosity. "What's your story?" "I'm just a soldier doing my job," she replied carefully, crafting her narrative while leaving out crucial details about her true identity. "But like everyone else, I've faced challenges, losses that shaped who I am today." The tension in the vehicle shifted slightly as they exchanged stories of struggle and sacrifice, each tale threading together fragments of understanding that transcended their circumstances. With every shared moment, Sarah unveiled insights into their motivations while subtly challenging them to reconsider their paths. "Do you think this is all worth it?" she asked quietly after a pause. "The risk you're taking by running away? What if it leads you right back to where you started?" Reed's expression shifted from defiance to contemplation as he considered her question, an internal struggle emerging on his face as he wrestled with choices made in desperation. "I just want freedom," he finally said, a hint of vulnerability breaking through his hardened exterior. "And freedom comes at a cost," Sarah replied softly. "But have you thought about what kind of life you're creating for yourself? Is it really worth risking everything?" Salvatore remained quiet, reflecting on her words as if they were seeds taking root within him, a slow realization dawning that perhaps freedom didn't mean running away, but rather confronting one's past. As they continued down the road under the canopy of stars above them, Sarah sensed a subtle shift in dynamics. They were no longer just captors and captive, but individuals sharing threads of pain and ambition woven into their narratives, a connection forged through empathy rather than animosity. In those moments of vulnerability, Sarah understood that she held power not just through her training, but also through compassion. a weapon far more potent than any physical strength or tactical advantage. By establishing this emotional bond with Reed and Salvatore, she began to see possibilities for redemption, not only for herself, but for them as well. As dawn approached on the horizon, casting light across darkened roads, Sarah realized that humanity could exist even amidst chaos. There was potential for change within each person if only they chose to confront their realities rather than flee from them. And perhaps in this unexpected alliance born from shared struggles lay the key to unlocking not just her own future, but theirs too. A possibility worth fighting for in ways none could yet foresee. As dawn began to break, the first rays of sunlight filtered through the trees lining the road, illuminating the SUV and casting shadows inside the vehicle. Major Sarah Thompson sensed that the time had come to seize control of her fate. The conversations she had shared with Reed and Salvatore had softened their edges, revealing vulnerabilities she could exploit. Their humanity was now a tool in her hands, one she intended to use to turn the tables on her captors. The tension within the vehicle had shifted since their earlier exchanges. Reed and Salvatore were no longer just desperate criminals, but men grappling with their choices, their motivations laid bare before her. Yet, despite this newfound connection, they remained a threat. She needed to act decisively before they realized how easily their confidence could waver. "Hey, she began casually, her voice steady as she leaned forward slightly in her seat. "I've been thinking about how this is all going to end for you too." Both men glanced at her warily, their expressions shifting from curiosity to defensiveness. "What do you mean?" Reed asked, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. "I mean," Sarah continued, keeping her tone light yet firm, "you're in a really precarious position right now. You're running from law enforcement and holding me hostage, two pretty big risks." She let the words sink in, watching their faces closely. Reed's jaw clenched as he considered her pointed observations. "We'll figure it out," he muttered defiantly. "What if I told you there's a way for you to get out of this mess?" Sarah said suddenly, her eyes locking onto Reed's with intensity. "A way that doesn't involve running and hiding forever? What are you talking about?" Salvatore asked, leaning forward with an edge of intrigue. "Think about it," she replied, allowing a hint of excitement to creep into her voice. "You've got a hostage who knows how to navigate these kinds of situations, someone who can help you escape without raising alarms." Reed's interest was piqued. He hesitated, uncertainty flickering across his face. "And why would you help us?" "Because I believe everyone deserves a second chance," Sarah said earnestly, gauging their reactions. She knew that appealing to their emotions could create an opening for negotiation. "And what's in it for you?" Reed pressed, skepticism still evident in his tone. "Freedom for both of us," she countered smoothly. "If we work together, I can help you find a safe place where you can lay low while I ensure law enforcement doesn't come looking for you." Salvatore exchanged glances with Reed, and Sarah could see doubt creeping into their minds, a crack in their facade of bravado. "Let me show you how we can make this happen," she continued confidently. "But first, you need to trust me." Reed pulled the SUV over onto a quiet side road lined with dense trees as he considered her proposition. The tension in the vehicle was palpable. Both men were caught between desperation and curiosity. Sarah seized upon this moment of vulnerability. "Now listen carefully," she said as she leaned closer and lowered her voice conspiratorially. "If we're going to pull this off, we need to act fast and think strategically." She laid out a plan that involved creating a diversion, something that would draw attention away from them long enough for them to slip away unnoticed. She suggested staging an encounter where they would feign an emergency and signal for help from nearby residents or passing cars. "What if it doesn't work?" Reed asked skeptically. "It will work because I'll be directing every move we make," Sarah replied firmly, her confidence radiating through every word. "You have no idea how valuable it is to have someone like me on your side right now." As she spoke, Sarah felt an undeniable shift in energy. Where once they held all the power in this dynamic, now it was slowly but surely inching toward her grasp. She was not just a captive anymore. She was becoming an ally, a strategist ready to orchestrate their escape. After several tense moments of deliberation, Reed finally nodded reluctantly, his defenses cracking under the weight of desperation. "Fine," he conceded gruffly. "Let's hear your plan." Sarah outlined each step carefully, directing them through the meticulous details while ensuring they felt included in the decision-making process. With every word spoken and every plan set into motion, Sarah felt herself reclaiming control, turning fear into purpose. As they prepared for their next move, adrenaline surged within her. It was exhilarating to be back in command, even if only temporarily. They were still at risk on many fronts. Law enforcement could show up at any moment, but Sarah knew there was strength in numbers and strategy. With renewed focus and determination coursing through her veins, Major Sarah Thompson had turned the tables on her captors and now stood poised not just as a survivor, but as a leader ready to pave the way toward freedom for herself and those who had once held her hostage. The game had shifted dramatically. It was no longer about escaping, but rather about unearthing possibilities that lay hidden beneath layers of fear and desperation, a path toward redemption waiting just beyond reach. The atmosphere inside the SUV was electric as Major Sarah Thompson prepared for the impending confrontation. She had orchestrated a plan that hinged on a moment of vulnerability, an opportunity she had fostered through empathy and strategic thinking. Now, with the dawn breaking outside, illuminating their surroundings, the time for action had arrived. As they pulled off the main road and into a secluded area filled with dense woods, Sarah felt her heart race, not out of fear, but from the adrenaline surging through her veins. She could sense that Reed and Salvatore were on edge, their nervous energy palpable as they approached the point where she planned to execute her carefully crafted strategy. "Remember, when we get out of the car, act natural," Sarah instructed in a low voice, her demeanor calm yet authoritative. "I'll signal when it's time to put the plan into action." Reed nodded, still grappling with the uncertainty of their situation. He was torn between following Sarah's lead and his instinctive need to assert control over the situation. Salvatore shifted nervously in his seat, glancing back at Sarah with a mix of wariness and curiosity. It was clear that they were both teetering on the edge of trust. Her words had planted seeds of doubt about their course of action. As they parked in a clearing surrounded by towering trees, Sarah glanced around, her mind racing with tactical considerations. She envisioned potential escape routes and contingencies should things go awry. The moment had come to reclaim her freedom. "Let's go," Reed barked as he opened his door, his voice cracking slightly under pressure. He and Salvatore stepped out first, scanning their surroundings, while Sarah followed closely behind. The air was thick with tension as they moved toward a small cabin nestled among the trees. It appeared abandoned, but had likely been used by hunters or hikers in the past. This would be their hideout, a temporary refuge from law enforcement, or so Reed believed. "Stay close," Reed instructed, trying to maintain an air of authority despite the uncertainty swirling around them. As they approached the cabin, Sarah prepared herself mentally for what lay ahead. She had observed every detail about Reed and Salvatore, their weaknesses, their hesitations, and now it was time to exploit them. Suddenly, she turned to them with sharp intensity. "This isn't going to work," she declared boldly. "You need to face reality. You can't keep running forever." "What are you talking about?" Reed snapped back defensively, but there was an underlying fear in his voice that betrayed his bravado. "I'm talking about how this ends," she replied firmly. "You think you can just hide away? You're only postponing the inevitable." Before either man could respond, Sarah made her move. In one fluid motion, she grabbed Reed's wrist and twisted it while simultaneously stepping aside to shove him off balance. The suddenness of her actions caught him off guard. He stumbled sideways into Salvatore, who barely managed to regain his footing. In that split second of chaos, Sarah seized an opportunity to assert herself fully. "You think you can kidnap me and walk away unscathed?" she shouted, her voice resonating with authority as she assumed control of the situation. Reed scrambled to regain his composure, but found himself facing a woman who was anything but ordinary. With swift precision honed by years of training, Sarah disarmed him before he could react fully, stripping the gun from his grasp and spinning it around until it pointed back at him. "Get down," she commanded sharply, aiming at Reed, while keeping her eyes trained on Salvatore as well. Panic flickered across both men's faces as they realized they were no longer in control of the situation. "What are you doing?" Salvatore stammered, raising his hands defensively. "Enough games," Sarah declared fiercely. "This ends now." With newfound confidence surging through her veins like fire, she stepped forward and maneuvered them both toward the cabin entrance. Inside, "Move." Reed shot her a furious glare but complied reluctantly. He understood that any further resistance would only escalate matters unfavorably for him and Salvatore alike. They hesitated for just a moment before shuffling inside under her watchful gaze. Once inside the dimly lit cabin, Sarah quickly surveyed her surroundings, assessing potential escape routes while keeping both captors in sight. The adrenaline coursing through her body heightened her awareness. She felt alive in ways she hadn't experienced during this harrowing ordeal. "You're making a mistake," Reed warned weakly as he attempted to regain some semblance of authority in front of Salvatore. "No," Sarah shot back decisively. "You made your mistakes long before this moment." With calculated precision, she positioned herself strategically between them and any potential exits, a move designed not just for defense, but also to assert dominance over their fate. As they exchanged heated glances filled with frustration and fear, Sarah felt an undeniable surge of power, a realization that she was no longer just a captive, but a force commanding respect. "Listen carefully," she said firmly as silence enveloped them once more. "If you want to walk out of here today without handcuffs on your wrists or worse, then you'll listen to me." The tension hung thick in the air like an electric charge as both men contemplated their next steps while gauging her unwavering resolve. They were at a crossroads where choices would define not only their futures but also their intertwined fates, the consequences of which none could yet foresee. Major Sarah Thompson stood firm amid chaos, a leader ready to reclaim her freedom by confronting fear head-on while turning the tide against those who once sought to imprison her spirit. As the first rays of sunlight streamed through the cabin's windows, Major Sarah Thompson found herself standing at a precipice of reflection. The confrontation with Reed and Salvatore had unraveled in ways she hadn't anticipated, and the aftermath of her decisive actions weighed heavily on her mind. With her captors subdued and law enforcement on their way to apprehend them, Sarah took a moment to process the whirlwind of emotions that had surged through her during those tense hours. The encounter had been more than just a fight for survival. It had turned into a complex interplay of power, vulnerability, and empathy. She had entered the situation as a hostage but emerged not only as a survivor, but as someone who had wrestled control back from those who sought to impose their will upon her. The adrenaline that had fueled her actions now faded, replaced by an introspective calm. Sarah leaned against the wooden wall of the cabin, her thoughts drifting back to Reed and Salvatore. They were not merely criminals, but men shaped by harsh realities. Individuals whose lives had taken unexpected turns due to choices made in moments of desperation. In her pursuit to understand them, she realized that their motivations were rooted in survival, much like her own. Were they truly evil, or simply products of their circumstances? She pondered silently. The question echoed in her mind as she recalled their stories. Their struggles for respect and freedom had mirrored her own fight for survival against captivity. The lines between right and wrong often blurred in a world driven by desperation, and Sarah felt an unexpected pang of sympathy for them. While the law would deem their actions unforgivable, Sarah understood that every person carried a story that shaped who they were. In confronting Reed's bravado and Salvatore's vulnerability, she had glimpsed the humanity buried beneath layers of fear and anger. Perhaps it was this very connection that allowed her to reclaim her power. By empathizing with their struggles, she had forced them to confront the reality of their choices. As she stood there, waiting for law enforcement to arrive, Sarah reflected on her own mission, the responsibilities she carried as a Delta Force commander. Her role extended far beyond combat. It was about protecting lives and understanding the complexities of human nature. Each engagement taught her valuable lessons about resilience and the potential for redemption within every individual. In the aftermath of this encounter, Sarah recognized that her experiences had deepened her commitment to her mission. She understood now more than ever that true leadership required not just tactical skills, but also emotional intelligence, the ability to connect with others on a fundamental level. It was this connection that could foster change and inspire hope even in the darkest circumstances. When law enforcement arrived moments later, agents moving with purpose through the clearing, Sarah felt a sense of closure wash over her. They quickly took control of the situation, securing Reed and Salvatore without incident. As she watched them being led away in handcuffs, she couldn't help but reflect on their fates. These men would face serious consequences for their actions, yet part of her hoped they might find redemption one day. Maybe it doesn't have to end like this, she thought wistfully. Maybe there's still time for them to choose differently. As she walked away from the cabin, flanked by officers ensuring everything was under control, Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose coursing through her veins. This experience would not only shape how she viewed captors, but also how she approached those she fought to protect. It reaffirmed her belief in second chances, both for herself and for others who found themselves trapped by circumstance. In the coming days and weeks, as she returned to her unit and resumed missions in service to others, Sarah carried with her the lessons learned from this harrowing experience: resilience in the face of adversity, compassion amid conflict, and an unwavering commitment to understanding the human condition. Amidst chaos and uncertainty, Major Sarah Thompson emerged not just as a commander, but as an advocate for empathy, a powerful reminder that even in captivity, one could find strength through connection and understanding. Her mission was not merely about fighting battles, but rather about fostering hope, a hope that could ignite change even in those who seemed lost forever. And with that resolve burning brightly within her heart, she stepped forward into whatever lay ahead, ready to face new challenges armed with wisdom gained from an unexpected journey through darkness into light. As Major Sarah Thompson returned to her unit, the weight of her recent experiences lingered like a shadow, intertwining with her thoughts and shaping her perspective on the missions that lay ahead. The encounter with Reed and Salvatore had not only tested her tactical skills, but it also forced her to confront deeper questions about morality, empathy, and the nature of captivity. In the days that followed, those lessons would resonate within her, prompting her to rethink the significance of her role as a commander. Back at the base, Sarah resumed her responsibilities, but she found herself approaching them with newfound vigor. Each briefing and operation took on a fresh meaning as she reflected on the importance of understanding the human element behind every mission. Her conversations with her team became infused with discussions about resilience, how they could better support one another and those they served. Yet, as much as she embraced this growth, a lingering sense of unfinished business haunted her. The complexities of Reed and Salvatore's lives weighed heavily on her mind. What would become of them? She couldn't shake the feeling that their stories were not yet over. Each time she closed her eyes, she recalled their faces, vulnerable yet defiant, and wondered if there was still a chance for redemption in their futures. The news cycles following their capture were relentless, swirling with sensational headlines about escaped prisoners and high-stakes kidnappings. Sarah watched from a distance as reporters dissected their backgrounds, framing them solely as villains. It struck her how easy it was for society to label individuals without considering the circumstances that led them to such desperate acts. She felt compelled to speak out, to advocate for understanding rather than judgment, an impulse that would surely shape future endeavors. In the weeks following her ordeal, Sarah found herself increasingly drawn toward outreach programs aimed at rehabilitating former offenders. As she delved into this new realm of work, she discovered opportunities to share her own story while advocating for alternative paths to reintegration into society. It became clear to her that she could use her position to foster change, not only in how people viewed former inmates, but also in how they could be supported toward a better future. One particular initiative captured her attention: a program that sought to connect veterans with ex-convicts struggling to navigate life outside prison walls. The parallels between their experiences intrigued Sarah. Both groups faced societal stigma and isolation, yet both possessed immense potential for growth if given the right tools and support. As she engaged with this new focus, Sarah's heart brimmed with hope. Perhaps by sharing her own journey and connecting with those who felt marginalized or lost, she could help bridge gaps between worlds, offering insights born from her time in captivity while empowering others to reclaim their narratives. However, as Sarah immersed herself in this work, she couldn't shake off an unsettling feeling that danger still lurked in the shadows. The encounter with Reed and Salvatore had been resolved, at least on the surface, but beneath the layers of their stories lay unresolved tensions and intricacies yet to be explored. Then came whispers of unrest within certain circles linked to Reed's past affiliations, a network he had once commanded that was slowly regaining strength. Reports indicated that remnants of his gang were plotting revenge against those responsible for his capture. This revelation sent a chill down Sarah's spine. It was clear that while one chapter had closed, another was poised to begin. Sarah's instincts kicked into high gear. She knew that proactive measures would need to be taken if she was to protect not only herself, but also those involved in rehabilitation efforts. Her training reminded her that staying ahead of threats was crucial, and now more than ever, fostering connections could yield unexpected allies. With renewed determination coursing through her veins, Sarah prepared herself for whatever challenges lay ahead, readying both mind and body for the battles that awaited. She understood that leadership transcended mere orders on a battlefield. It also meant navigating complex human emotions and societal dynamics. Each day brought new opportunities for growth, not only for herself, but also for those around her. And with every step forward came the promise of adventure waiting just beyond reach. As she stood at the precipice of this new chapter in her life, Major Sarah Thompson felt an undeniable sense of purpose ignite within. There were stories left untold and lives waiting to be transformed. And so, as dawn broke over the horizon once more, a radiant reminder of hope, the stage was set not just for resolution, but for future adventures yet unwritten. With an unwavering spirit guiding her path, Sarah Thompson stepped boldly into tomorrow, ready to face whatever challenges awaited while carrying with her the lessons learned from an unexpected journey through darkness into light.